Michelle Rowland here, your Attorney General, and I'm here to provide some clarity on our new legislation. Now, this bill is about ensuring that our investigative agencies like the AFP and ASIO have the ability to implement provisions that enable them to address the root causes of conduct that may or may not fall within the scope of what we are seeking to achieve, depending on other factors. I want to be very clear about that. What we have done is introduce a tight set of laws that are capable of interpretation, not only by a court, but also by our agencies. And that is important because interpretation is how laws are implemented by agencies who interpret them in order to implement them. Now, some provisions have changed in response to negotiations with the opposition and also in response to other provisions which themselves were provisions, but they still represent what we are seeking to bring within this regime in terms of keeping Australians safe from the things that this bill addresses before they were negotiated into different provisions, which are now the new provisions that we have. Look, I'll be reluctant to be naming specific kinds of conduct or indeed general kinds of conduct or conduct of any kind, but what I can say is that there are a number of factors that would need to be satisfied in conjunction with certain aspects of state laws dealing with racial vilification, which may or may not have been met, depending on the evidence gathered by the agencies. The point I would make is this, and I think this is an important point. Whilst these matters are complex, they're also not complex, and of that we have been clear from the outset about the scope of the clarity and the kinds of groups that we are seeking to address at their root causes. So to summarise, the provisions are provisions, the agencies will implement them and the courts will interpret them, and Australians will be kept safe from the things that this bill addresses, which are outlined in the bill. It's really very straightforward. Look, if you don't understand the law, you are less likely to break it. That's not legal advice. No, that is clarity.
Richard Wolsterncroft, Richard Wolsterncroft, a great friend of mine, and I think one of the great philosophers of our time, actually, and especially in Australia, one of the bravest by far. He did a thing the other day about the hate speech laws alive, and the thing that really shook me was it was the first time I'd really seen deep concern in his face. And so I've asked him to come on today to talk about it because he's a soft cock and, you know, he's just, anyway, sorry, I shouldn't have done that bit. That was my thing. But no, seriously.
You want me to be serious and then you make a joke.
I know, but I was really moved. I know I couldn't help myself, but I was really moved by it because I thought, wow, this is getting so effing serious now, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, obviously I do, I do your show and I do the Report from Tiger Mountain, which is just an independent video blog live that I do. It's connected to the Unshackled, which is just a right-wing site that's been around probably before me. And also I do Sam Newman's show, You Can't Be Serious podcast. And, you know, I mean, when these hate speech laws were, proposed, I just thought, well, that's the end of the Report from Tiger Mountain. I thought in relation to Sam, due to his celebrity, that he will, they won't go for Sam Newman first because it would be a huge outrage. It would be, you know what I mean. But it puts under threat anyone, who, wants to question immigration, wants to question welcome to country. I mean, you know, Sam has, suggested people boo the welcome to country, and as we've seen, some people did that, when, like one of those Anzac Day things, and they were arrested. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, it's, and we've all seen what's happened in the United Kingdom, which is,
Oh, well, I've got a video about that, Richard. Just watch this. So this is a man driving around like in my bus. He's got something on his thing. Watch these police, and they actually say it's offensive. So just being offensive now is an offence.
We've had a report, obviously, with the sign that's on the van at the minute.
So?
Someone's just obviously made us aware that you're driving around with it.
Yeah.
So they just want us to have a chat with yourselves.
Who?
Just to see, just you two, just to see what your plans are, what's going on, what you're doing today.
Well, you're just holding us up for no reason.
Okay.
Well, have we committed a crime?
We're just trying to have a discussion at the minute. Obviously,
No, I'm asking you a question. Have we committed a crime?
So at the minute, you've got the word wanker displayed on the sign. So someone might take offence to that. I know, obviously, you might see it as a different way, but technically, it's a public order offence.
The only person who would take offence to that is Keir Starmer. Everyone else agrees with it.
I'm not saying anything in terms of that. I've got to remain biased, but that's obviously why I've come down to...
But if we've not committed a criminal offence, then can we go?
Well, just for the time being, we've
it's in terms of you've got Britain First written on the side of your van.
So
what's wrong with it? It's a prescribed organisation.
No, it's not.
What?
It's a registered political party.
Just give us 2 seconds to run everything through. But obviously you're detained at the minute.
We're detained.
Why.
We're detained.
What's your details, lovely?
No, she doesn't have to.
Right.
She isn't driving. I have to give you my
It's
details.
not in relation to the driving offences, is it?
It's a what?
I'll run you through.
It's a what?
I'll run you through. We've already explained why you've been stopped in terms of the banner that you've got on your van.
And we're a prescribed terrorist organisation, yeah? That's what you said.
Through, mate, in terms of your van and everything like that, and then we'll decide where we're going from there, and we can give you a bit more information.
I'll tell you where we're going after that. We're going home.
Oh my God, they've blocked us in. Look at this. Literally, they've blocked us in so we can't go anywhere. This is absolutely outrageous.
So, I believe you've not wanted to pass your details.
Yes.
So, under Section 50 of the
Yeah.
Form Act 2002, a uniformed police officer can require you to pass your name and address if we believe you've engaged in antisocial behaviour. We've had several calls about this vehicle, and obviously the things coming out of it, i.e. the speeches that I believe are coming out of it.
Anyway, you get the gist.
Yeah, I get
the thing is, they don't want this on the road. And basically, the laws in England are you can't offend anyone, which is 1984. Everyone defaults to silence. And
Absolutely.
I'm seeing that I had a prophetic thing happen the other day. I'm going to write about it tomorrow. I was in an op shop in a town called Cowell, and I was just chatting to this woman there, an elderly woman, and she's run pubs. She's a dinky die Aussie from way back. And I said to her about the hate speech laws, and she said this, and I think this is profound. She said, I've never been racist in my whole life. I've worked in pubs, I've owned pubs, I've worked with all races. But the current Prime Minister is starting to lead me towards racism. I'm not liking coloured people because it's clear to me that they are more favoured by the Prime Minister than me. It's, they're allowed to speak and we're not. And so it's creating racism. Instead of actually...
Well, of course, what you get when you have a prime minister, and it's not obviously not just happening in Australia, it's happening in all Western countries, apart from some in Eastern Europe, like Poland and Hungary, where the government places foreigners above the local population. And I mean, one of the most amazing things is that, our left-wing parties, for example, the Labor Party under, say, Bob Hawke, that the Labor Party always cared about, at least in the 80s, at least it seemed to anyway, care about they would talk about raising wages for working people. They would talk about the Aussie battlers. Bob Hawke talked about that, even Paul Keating did. And, the silent majority and all this stuff. This has all gone out the window and been replaced by woke politics, which in my opinion is an ersatz politics, which is a fake politics. That's real purpose is to create ethnic division, racial division. Division based on like sexuality to do with and trans and all this stuff, and that because the relationships between all these communities have grown worse under woke. But I don't say that's no, that's its function. Its function is to create division so they can then bring in top down totalitarian 1984. They're destroying all European countries at the moment. And and now they're making it illegal to notice it and to talk about it. And the one thing that, I said in my report from Tiger Mountain this week is that, luckily, the provision that anyone who just, who offended somebody, because think about that, anyone who offended anybody.
Well, that's when I think about you, you are. And what I love about you is you can't help being not offensive. I mean, it is just your way, but it's your job. You are a contrarian.
I've always tried to be.
People. And I think that's really important.
That's really what I've always tried to do. When I was running the Hellfire Club, when I run the Melbourne Underground Film Festival, and with the films I make, and the podcasts I do, I always try and put the cat amongst the pigeons, because to me, that was what a good artist did. A good artist made you think.
Exactly.
I don't ask people to always agree with me on everything. As a matter of fact, it's good when they don't. It's even good. I mean, Sam Newman and I agree on many things, but it's always more interesting when we don't agree on things, because I'm probably a bit further right wing than he is. You know what I mean? And and also, he might be pro-Israel. I'm not pro-Israel, and blah blah blah. And there are various points of contention outside of that. But it's always interesting, when there's a debate. And Jordan Peterson did say something very good. Is that when you have these kind of hate speech laws, you essentially can't think, and when you can't think, you know what I mean? It really. This was like, to me, when I first heard of these laws, it was that serious that I thought, this is the end of Australia, under the original legislation. Now, it has been watered down a bit, and I don't think they're applying it mainly, as I've said on the report, to groups, you know what I mean, to people who are members of the NSN group, or, some far, like radical Muslim group and radical Muslim preachers, which obviously, if after this event you were to say, okay, we're going to monitor mosques further, and we're going to monitor the kind of hate speech that might go on in mosques, if that was the main thing the government had said, I would go, oh, all right. I mean, I believe in religious freedom, but if you wanted to watch those groups, because that was obviously the group involved in the terror attack. And I don't celebrate the terror attack. I might be critical of Israel, but I certainly don't celebrate the awful attack upon the Jewish community. A lot of Jewish people are certainly not part of, what's going on in Israel. Even if they support it, they're not directly involved. And with things like Epstein and stuff, this is something that's happening in elite circles. So you can't blanket grime in any group. But I think our countries are in desperate situations, and I thought we would enter a thing called eternal exile, which is something that happened, for example, to people who are right wing or nationalists under communism. They had to just basically shut up. They couldn't talk. If you opposed Stalin or opposed Lenin or Trotsky,
that was right.
Whatever, you couldn't say anything. They would allow some people to continue to exist in society if they shut up. And this also happened in places like Nazi Germany. If you were critical of the Nazi regime, you could exist as long as you shut up. You know what I mean? And that is a terrible situation, in my opinion, when, because we were basically at the precipice of internal exile. It becomes, I was thinking, I may have to leave Australia, because I don't really want to live in a country where you can't express what you're thinking.
Richard. Extraordinary comments. Yeah.
And, a country like Japan, for example, you can actually express your opinions there on anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they fought against us in World War II. There are many other countries, Hungary and Poland, you can say what you like. I mean, what's even a bigger joke is you could probably say a lot of what I say in Russia, and you would never get a knock on the door from the KGB. You know what I mean?
No, that's true.
There's more freedom of speech in Russia, which was, we all grew up, you and I are the same age approximately. We grew up, and Russia was like the Iron Curtain, mate. This is where you couldn't say anything against the government.
We think we had a visit from the Secret Services the other day. Someone came to somewhere we were staying, knocked on the door, and were sort of making out that they were a follower and all this, but the language was all off. They looked like a cop. And at one point they were sitting in the room, and I did say, he said, "Oh, you probably think I'm a cop." I said, "Yeah, actually I do." And so we don't know for certain, but it was really strange. You're thinking, and I was sort of saying to him, if you are a cop or from Asia or wherever, we're not your enemy. We just got questions, mate.
I think they know that, but the problem is that the agenda is destructive. I mean, they essentially they're destroying our countries. I mean, and this is treason. I'm not a sovereign citizen. I don't believe in any of this, all that sovereign citizen stuff. But the thing is, the general point that our government is illegitimate is true. And then we'll get into this in the second half hour, the stuff about Epstein. Can
I just put another thing to you? This is about wokeism. I saw a woman the other day on Instagram talking about it. I don't know where she's from, but she had a really interesting thesis. And she said it stems from feminism, because she said, if you ask men, is free speech important? 2/3 of men say absolutely, it's essential, you must have it. But 2/3 of women disagree. they think, no, it's best not to offend people. And she thinks that what's happened is, as more women have come into politics and everywhere like this, that in her thesis, that the not offending people is more important now than free speech. And
yes, well, I mean,
what we're seeing. And that's what we're seeing in England. Look at them.
Men are more inherently disagreeable. Obviously, I'm somebody who's would be considered a disagreeable person. You, to some extent, would be considered disagreeable, even though you're a bit more peace and love than I am. You know what I mean? Like, so, you know what I mean? Like, and there's this whole thing with women in empathy. That's why women make great nurses, because they can, when somebody is suffering in a hospital, it doesn't matter what kind of person they are. Women can be empathetic to them. They can be foreign, they can be this, they can be that, they can be even someone a nurse might not like, and the nurse will be empathetic to that person because they're suffering. And unfortunately, though, women's empathy has been, and the empathy of all people, including Western men, has been weaponized against us. And it's one of the main weapons that's been used to destroy us. And that's what Elon Musk said, that, empathy is the main tool they use. And, I mean, like I really am supportive of women, and I love listening to women, and I have a lot of conversations.
Yeah, me too, man.
Women are incredibly smart, and I love talking to them. So I don't want to say anything that would be, but it is interesting. It is interesting, though, that 100 years ago, women got the vote, right? After essentially 5,000 years of civilization. And, now, and it's destroying everything. You know what I mean? Like, in a sense. Now, it doesn't mean I disagree with women voting or whatever, but like, it's just an odd thing to notice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, women's suffrage, which occurred in the 1920s. And obviously we're in 2020s at the moment, and the 2020s is nowhere near it. The 1920s were very exciting. It was the jazz age. It was the time of F. Scott Fitzgerald. And, well, how did we kick off our 2020s? With a fucking pandemic where you couldn't go. Yeah. You couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't do anything. So, it is interesting, and women need to really be aware that their empathy or their kind side is being manipulated. And you should be aware of politicians that look like Macron, that look like that guy Newsom, who might be handsome, who might be someone you might, if you're a woman, might
like the guy, like the Canadian guy.
The Canadian guy. What's his name again? The guy, the son of not Che Guevara, of Castro.
I think it was the devil.
Trudeau, Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
So these are good-looking guys that most women would not kick out of bed if they farted. But they are aware of that. The cabal leaders, the people on Epstein Island or whatever, they're aware that a good-looking man like Newsom, Macron, and Justin Trudeau will fool a lot of women, and that's how they get them in. And also, obviously too, they rely on immigrants to vote in favour of them, and the left-wing parties, and I think that's why the Labor Party is getting support from the Indian community and the Asian community, who probably don't share any of the values, because they're both conservative countries, but they do want more Indian people here because they realise that what's going on is that it's basically a race for colonisation of Australia now between Indians and Chinese people. So government.
Can I say, just going back to, I want to talk about that too briefly, but just. Because I live on the road, and because I did that big trip with early on, the deplorables trip, we'd get to towns and we'd turn up and there'd be a huge amount of people waiting to talk. Sometimes we couldn't get all the interviews. Now people are terrified to talk. That's why there's hardly any interviews done. And you're seeing it on the road. And because the laws are so vague, like that comedian said at the start, people are just defaulting to silence. Like even that woman I talked to in the op shop, she looked around first just to check if anyone could hear.
Of course, yeah.
And then she speaks to me. And that's already happened. Yeah, that's right. And you see it all the time. So people come up to we're on a caravan park and people will shun us. Or they'll be sitting like 5 caravans away watching us. And if I come out, they'll give a little hand. But that's as far as they'll go. They won't talk to us. It was done of it. It's done.
It's again similar.
It everywhere.
It's similar to the COVID laws. I mean, one thing I've noticed about Melbourne since the end of COVID, obviously you've been traveling, but I've noticed Melbourne is a dead city at night. Melbourne was never a dead city. I ran nightclubs for years, and every now and then I get dragged out. Just coming home from Nick Cave, I saw Nick Cave in concert, at the down near the Arts Centre. There, it was a fantastic show, and I loved it, and it was great to see him play live. He's kind of a gospel show, kind of it is now. And but coming home, the city's so quiet, and people are afraid of the crime, and you just see, and there's these strange homeless people everywhere that they're dangerous on the street, and they're yelling and talking to themselves, and one of them could jump at you at any second and stab you or whatever. So Melbourne's become an unsafe city. People are staying home, and the whole point of these hate speech laws is exactly what you just said. That people have already entered what I called before internal exile. They have decided that now it's too dangerous to speak. People who study the laws like us, we can notice. No, we can still get away with what we're doing. But the average person probably thought, well, I can't say anything anymore.
Can't say anything about this. Basically, if they're going to be offensive, they just say nothing. And so they shun conversation. But I do think, too, that the homeless people are like every time there's a big event, they clean up. They get hotel rooms.
Yes,
the government can easily fix it.
They did that during COVID,
I think so obviously Just finish. I think they're used to control us, to control people. Do what you're told, or you're going to be living on this street in a bus stop. And so they're used to control the rest of society. So they don't give a flying fuck about them, to be honest.
No, they're a kind of thing. Look what happens if this system turns against you. You're going to be like a screaming person on the side of the sidewalk. I agree. Because in many countries of the world, the homeless problem is solved in many different ways. I'm a fan of the Singaporean system.
That's right,
where they're swept up, they're taken to a place, and they've got enough alcohol and drugs, and they're given jobs, and then they're reintegrated in society. But it's done with force. So a lot of people might not like that. It's not necessarily probably the Australian way to go about it. There's probably other ways, but giving them some form of accommodation, some form of centre. For example, they have these.
Look at this here, Alexander
Richard,
Sexton.
You think Melbourne is dead
at night Sunday? At night, Sydney is a ghost town.
I haven't been to Sydney. I used to run a nightclub there at Black Market nightclub near Newtown for about 10 years. I ran a nightclub there, and I loved the Sydney nightlife. I stayed at the Hyatt on the Park every week, and it was fantastic. I love Sydney, but I've heard that. I want to get up there. I wanted to pop up, maybe see Joel Jamal and a few other people, and also to just go to the bookshops up there. They got beautiful bookshops, and I watched this fascinating documentary on Brett Whiteley the other night. I probably want to go to the Whiteley Gallery now after seeing that. It's fascinating. It's terrible, though, because we have such wonderful countries. I mean, people should realize, the idea of the destruction of Australia, the destruction of France, the destruction of the United Kingdom. Yeah. These are shocking things. These are the worst things that have ever happened in the history of humanity.
Now, let's talk
because after World War II and World War One, these countries still survived. Even Germany survived World War II, and recovered very well in the 50s and 60s. But our countries are not going to recover from mass migration because no one's ever done it before. And the people behind.
I want to talk about that because I'm seeing it here everywhere. Like all the garages are owned by Indians. I'm going to write something about it tomorrow to sum up. So I'm not going to go there yet. But this mass migration from the subcontinent is being organized or led by white people. All the politicians who are bringing it in are white, and I know that sounds like that was racist, but the thing is, we were a fundamentally white nation, and I don't think, and I've been for multiculturalism. I like going places where there's different cultures. I love it, but if you become a minority in your own country, if the whites become a silenced minority, it's madness to think that your children and your grandchildren are not going to suffer under that, because other nations, whether it's not they don't do it to be hateful, they just look after each other. They will,
one of the reasons, I mean, I'll say it quite openly, I've never liked multiculturalism. I was opposed to multiculturalism in the 90s, and I said it to all my left-wing friends, of which I had many of them when I was running nightclubs who were all quite lefty. And it wasn't because I was essentially racist. It wasn't because of that at all. It's just because I saw that it would lead to the destruction of our countries. And that at that stage, though, I will admit, in the 90s and even the early double O's, that even though there was multiculturalism, it wasn't really that big a problem. From living here. But I just knew the direction in which it was heading. And then also, once it reached a point of I guess what you'd call it critical mass, where 10% to 20% of the population were now essentially foreign, that's when, rather than pull back, which was the logical thing to do, right? Rather than pull back and slow it down so that the change to the society, which was obviously the logical thing to do, they sped it up.
Yeah.
They began to flood millions and millions. It's like, and that's when you see that it is an agenda to destroy our countries. That,
so it's not migration now. We're talking about mass migration because every shop you go into these days is run by foreigners. Agreed, Richard. But what I'm seeing to how mass migration is not working, you go to these towns like Grafton and all these other towns, especially through New South Wales. I haven't seen in Adelaide yet, and there is enormous homelessness. The parks are full of tents. The riverside is full of tents and people sleeping in cars.
Well, the local populations,
and just to finish, Rich, but they're all white people. There's a few Aborigines, but they're white people. And in the town, all the shops are now being owned by Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, whatever. But mainly those groups. And so to me, it's like, well, how do these homeless people get back on their feet and start being productive in society again, having businesses and stuff? So when we were looking to see if the Indians get these grants, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow, what we found, I'm thinking, well, couldn't these white people get grants? I mean, re-educate them how to run businesses, doing something, and get them back on the feet. Because I'm telling you, the majority of them are putting up with it, but the majority of them do not want to live in a tent in the middle of winter in New South Wales.
No. White Australia is being colonized. And then in a sense, we actually have a lot more in common with the Aborigines than probably either us or the Aborigines believe. One of the reasons that you see so many problems within the Aboriginal community is there is a sense of hopelessness. There is a sense of their culture has been replaced, that no one cares about them. And it's true that, this has been the case even when we were in charge, and it was mainly in Anglo-Saxon Australia. So what happened to them, right, that we've seen over the 200 years, up to, say, the 1970s, 1980s, is now happening to us, okay?
Yeah.
And that when you see them on the side of the road, they're never to be taken care of, and that's the whole point.
That's right. You look at, say, Clare, I did a video about it, Australia Day, in a historic town. I mean, it's all stone buildings. It's built by white people who came out here and built it. It's our heritage. Not a single flag. We walked up and down the streets. We found one flag hanging in a chemist. The chemist, I believe, is run by an Indian. So he had only an Indian chemist was the only one who had proudly selling the Australian flag. No one else did. And when I was walking around the supermarket, and I know I've said this before, I was walking around the supermarket with a little Aussie flag in my hat, and the Woolworths had nothing about Australia in it. Nothing. I felt the same as if I was not wearing a mask in the mask mandates. That's how awkward people were with me wearing an Aussie cap and stuff like this. And I think, this is not going to get better.
I think because we're not under lockdown, people think that we're not still under attack. We are. We're actually probably under an even worse attack in a way than we were during COVID. You've done a couple of really great videos of late. The one where you suggested that Indians were getting some kind of special grant to
that's what we're going to write about tomorrow.
Now, I believe that is true, but it may just be that there would be Indian activist groups or who advocate for the Indian community who've worked out that say a family of 10 can get, I don't know, $50,000 per person. I don't know the exact rules, but there would be grants to give people, or particularly newcomers, I imagine. And then they're using that to buy up a business, and then the whole family run it for 10 years. And then at the end of it, they're millionaires. You know what I mean? Of a 10-year period.
The interesting thing is...
And you know why? It's because they collectivize. They collectivize, right?
Evolutionarily, they are better designed to this, because we've had 40 years of abundance. We're all individualists. We're all living our individual lives, but we're going into really hard economic times, which are being forced upon us. We shouldn't really be broke with all this wealth, but they're engineering it. And I think people from the subcontinent are better designed to handle these economic conditions because they work together. I was talking to an old Aussie guy today, and he said he was talking to these Indians. He doesn't mind them. He's talking to them. He talks to them a lot. And he was talking to a guy in a garage, and he says, so, how much do you mind asking how much you get paid? He goes, $10. And he was here on a visa, and he thought $10 an hour was incredible. He'd never seen that amount of money when he was living in Mumbai. So to him, it's $10. So they're not going to hire an Australian and pay 30, 40 or 50, 60 bucks. They're going to hire this. So it's, in a way, it's like a form of slavery.
It's slave labor. Let's be honest. It's slave labor.
Slave labor. Yeah.
And, you know, it's you know, we are really, I mean, the great replacement theory, as Tucker Carlson has really, it's no longer a conspiracy theory. I mean, this goes back to a thing called the Kalagi Plan, which people, you look it up online. It's like, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. But is it a conspiracy theory if it's actually happening? You know what I mean? Like, because all this diversity agenda is only targeted at Western European countries. You don't see it happening to India. There's not all these ethnic people moving to India and taking over India. There's not all these ethnic people moving to China.
Well, that's what I said on the day. There's no way, if we were in Mumbai, there's no way Mumbai would go, oh, look, we've got some Australians here. I know it's a National India Day, Independence Day, but take all the flags down because we don't want to offend Australians. Exactly. Or
I don't even think
take all the flags down. We don't want to offend the Australians.
I don't even think our National Day really offends you know, Chinese Australians or Indian Australians. A lot of them are happy to be here, and I would say to them, one of the things the Indians and Chinese that have come here, you're here now, but believe me, the lifestyle that we're all enjoying still is going to go away. You know, the idea of mass immigration is to lower the living standards for everybody, including new immigrants. So that's why new immigrants should oppose further immigration. Of course, many won't because they have families still over in India or China they want to bring here. But they should. Yeah, well, it should be noted that Macron has brought. It's just been announced that France is now essentially a third world country. Now that to me, you know, is shocking. That was probably the second major world power after Britain. It was the French Empire. This is Napoleon. Napoleon very nearly defeated England. Only 200 years ago at the Battle of Waterloo, we came very close to speaking French, ladies and gentlemen. The great Emperor Napoleon, who, by the way, I love Napoleon. I love everything about him. He was a very early nationalist. He's maybe invented nationalism, you could say, even though nationalism existed before. We love Napoleon. You know, he was a great man, achieved extraordinary things, invented the modern world in many ways. And, you know, France was such a huge power to see. If Napoleon were to see France of today, well, I'll tell you what, in a week later, there'd be a revolution and Napoleon would be back in charge, recrowning himself emperor, mate. That's the way you do it.
I just want to show you some things here, though, because we're in the hour, so I'm just keeping it short. This came from Canada today. Health Canada seals COVID vaccine injury files for 15 years. So in Canada, if you've got a vaccine injury, they're not going to recognize it for at least 15 years.
And look at the woman. She's Indian. You know what I mean? Like, you know, that's the minister. I mean, this is it. The mayor of London is from Pakistan. I mean, you know, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, well, let's move now to the next thing of this is Epstein files. And this, we're being flooded with it. This is Bono. Hello, Bono.
Yeah.
And it seems
I met Bono.
He's finally found what he's looking for, I think.
Yeah, obviously.
So, but I just want to play this by Epstein. This is Epstein, but listen to this video. This is really quite...
Called the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission is some spooky stuff. People said it was some of the people that, the Illuminati, there's some mystery about it, people that ran the world. It was politicians, but David said most countries, the politicians get elected for 4 years or 8 years, separate from the royal families in England or in the Middle East. Someone's there for 4 years and then they're not there anymore. The most important people to have stability and consistency would be businessmen. So he formed this trilateral commission of businessmen and politicians from 3 major continents. So it was the North Americans, the Europeans, and the Asians. So he said to me, would you like to be on the Trilateral Commission? Now, I was 30 years old, 32 years old. I said, great. And he said, well, you have to fill out this application so they have your bio. And I looked at the list of people, and it was Bill Clinton, former president of the United States, Paul Volcker, every great leader in America, the Asians, the Japanese. and with a very long description of their history. And they asked me to fill in what I would like to have written. And I wrote Jeffrey Epstein, comma, just a good kid.
Bow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this makes sense. Because it feels like the corporations are running the world. That's what I feel. They're making.
Yeah, I mean, David Thrussell would be great to talk on things like the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, Bohemian Grove, the Bilderbergers. You know, I mean, there are these secret, semi-secret, business and political.
I'm just showing this for fun. Conspiracy Barbie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about the Epstein files is that essentially the far right and what they've been saying for many, many years is correct. Everything is proven in those emails, the latest tranche. Essentially, Mel Gibson is 100% correct. And he's not in the files, obviously. You know what I mean? He's been
that's right.
In Eastern Europe or Greece somewhere with a whole bunch of Christians. For some reason, Jesus Christ seems to upset these group of people. And, there's a very interesting interview in that same interview where Steve Bannon says, do you consider yourself the devil? You know what I mean? And he says, well, the devil scares me. He says, well, I imagine that's correct. If he's if he's dead, he would be with the devil at the moment, I think, without a shadow of a doubt. And if he's still alive, which some people have suggested, well, he still won't live forever, wherever he's hiding out in some kibbutz in Israel or whatever. But so this is how it's done. This is, it's like, why are our politicians betraying our countries, right?
That's the thing.
It's not the only tool. I mean, if you look at someone like Daniel Andrews, who's sick at the moment, this whole bike. I've looked into this whole bike.
Hopefully, it's nothing minor.
Where him and his wife, one of them was obviously drink driving, and one of them hit this kid. So I think that aligned because there's that whole saying, weak men, create bad, situations. Daniel Andrews is a weak guy. So, rather than coming out front and saying, listen, I was driving or my wife was driving or whatever, and just telling the truth, and the people would have forgiven him. He's had this hanging over him as like a sword of Damocles. And so when they came to him and said, listen, we've got this information. We know you were driving or where your wife was or whoever. And, so you're going to lock us down forever. And he's like, oh, no trouble. And so probably when they said, come along and take the vax, he probably took it without asking for the saline version. He probably said, give it to me. And that's probably what's happened to him. You know what I mean? I have no idea. Some people say it's fake because he could be meant to go to court. But I, in my personal opinion, I think he took the jab and he took the bad one, mate, and he's having problems. Like many people. So that's.
Can we really be that lucky?
Well, I honestly think that's what's happened. But obviously, there are different theories.
Amazing, man.
If he drops dead, there's a lot of credence to that. I actually don't hate the guy. Obviously I don't like him, but I don't wish.
I don't say I hate him, but I won't miss him.
No, I wouldn't miss him, but it just goes to show, and I think Albo is of a similar cloth. When Tucker Carlson was here, he said, someone like that you can just buy. You can just buy because there's somebody who's only ever worked in the public service. If you could make them somehow present them with a way to give them $10 million from China so that when they stop being prime minister, they can live in comfort, they would take it. These are weak people. These are not people you need to even get to Epstein Island. But the thing about, it's incredible. For example, they talk about the Goyim, you know what I mean? Like in the Epstein things, Michael Wolff, who wrote the 2 hostile biographies of Trump, is conniving with Epstein. There's so much information there that's come out.
What else have you seen in it?
They talk about Pizzagate. They talk about pizza all the time. So that Epstein is Pizzagate.
Can we talk about Bill Gates? Because they're saying that Bill Gates was seeing prostitutes after prostitutes. And I was thinking, well, he's the richest man in the world. So you're kind of going to expect that he's probably going to. He's not going to be an angel.
It's always a question too. Like, I mean, are these underage prostitutes or are they 20-year-olds? Because I'm pretty damn sure that Epstein, when if you're in the elite society, that when you first met Jeffrey Epstein, he had a 23-year-old and a 25-year-old Victoria's Secret model on his arm. That anybody who's a celebrity would think, well, this guy's just wealthy and he hangs out with models because he's very close with Les Wexner. So you would think, well, he might be fun to hang out with, and you're going to end up with a 25-year-old model. It's not against the law. So you can see people. That's why it's a honeypot. They come in, and then when then maybe you hang out at his New York apartment, you sleep with a 25-year-old, no problem. Then he says, look, I got this island. What do you think? So when you get down there, then that's when things become a bit inappropriate, and maybe you don't even notice. Maybe you're drunk, you're high, you don't check IDs, and they've got you, right? That's the whole purpose.
What if they even spiked your drink? So you got in and you just.
I have no idea if Prince Andrew,
because
knew what he was getting into. He probably did know what he was getting into, but maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just a fool.
Actually have. I got Grok to do what are the greatest revelations. And one of them, it said it was definitely there were cameras everywhere, and they were used for blackmailing. So they were used for blackmailing to blackmail powerful people. This is what they were doing. So,
and of course, that's not come out.
But I just need to say this because I know this is dangerous. Probably get me arrested. But all the evidence points to a Mossad honeypot operation.
Well, it definitely was that. And they're trying to blame it in media. The whole case has gotten so radioactive that mainstream media is now trying to push the line that Putin was involved and it's KGB, right? Now, that's nonsense. Putin is not connected to this really in any way, outside of the fact maybe they tried to contact him at different stages and he went no, because he would know from his own intelligence agencies not to have anything to do with them. So, and Alexander Dugin, who is an advisor to President Putin, he says that essentially the Epstein case and these leaks prove that Western civilization and their leaders are completely illegitimate or delegitimized. And that's very, very interesting in the sense that, like, now we know why they are traitors, because they're either owned or they're bought, or someone they know is owned or bought, or they've been threatened by this group, and it's incredibly nefarious. It's incredibly Machiavellian.
Well, look at your leader in Victoria now.
And there's some stuff about eating people in these things. I mean, all the worst stuff you've heard. We all heard these things, and even myself, I was like, these people are crazy. It can't be that bad, and yet. There are examples in these new tranche of George W. Bush eating a boy, and just like, what the hell is, this is, and obviously that's not what you get the first time you meet Jeffrey Epstein. It's like, oh, come over, we're going to eat a boy. You know what I mean? That's not the first level. That's the ninth level of hell, right?
That's right.
Let's put it like the 9 levels of hell. The first level of hell is 25-year-old models at a party, and anybody would be suckered into that probably. So, and then slowly you get down to the other levels. And obviously many never got to the 9th level.
White Dawn says why Epstein doesn't matter, but I think he does, because it's starting to teach us how it all works. Because we've been looking at decisions made by politicians all over the world that just don't make sense. Everyone's going, what? You did what? And we see it in, like, another thing. There's been a huge case in America where a transitioner basically has now sued her psychiatrist and the surgeon for $2 million and won for being forced to transition. I think it was from a girl to a boy, so she had her breast removed and stuff, and she won. Now, this should send fear and repercussions all through every country where they're doing these transgender operations. But here you have in your state, Victoria, is her name Jacinta?
Jacinta Allen.
Here she is pushing it, and she's going, well, in my data, she goes, in my data, so many children who feel they're born in the wrong body or trans kids kill themselves. And she just says it there. And if anyone attacks her, she attacks them. But the statistics prove that it's after they've transitioned that they kill themselves.
Of course, and that's the whole purpose of it.
Yeah.
These Indian families and these Chinese families that come here, they're not embracing transgender ideology. This ideology is aimed at Western families. It's like your son is your daughter and your daughter is your son. Your wife is a radical feminist with this is what they want to do. It's called de-atomization. They're de-atomization. And it's because we're weak, because we no longer have a family structure. And we no longer collectivize. We see everybody as competitive. We don't, for example, when you're hiring for your business, you don't think, I'm going to hire another really good Anglo-Saxon person. It used to be the way that Australia worked all the time. But no, we've been told if you do that, you're racist. But no, it's just in-group preference. Do you think Indians, when they're hiring for their 7-Elevens, and every time you go to 7-Eleven, it's an Indian, you think they're thinking, oh, I've got to be diverse? No, they're racist openly towards their own group. And does anyone ever criticize them?
And I don't mind good on for doing it. You know,
but
well,
sure, but we don't do it. We don't do it, and that's why.
We're the wrong ones. When I was in the trams, there were several depots. Right now, one of the depots I think was Glen Ira or Glen something. Anyway, there I remember then the union. This gave me a lot of trouble too. The union was really cracking down because Indians had taken over the depot. And all they were employing was other Indians. Now, to me, I thought, this is how they work. This is their culture working. They mates looking after mates. I mean, the politicians employ mates. I don't have an issue with it as long as we're allowed to do the same, you know?
Yeah, but we're not, obviously. And that's the whole, I mean, this is what the meaning of diversity, equity, and inclusion is. It's anti-white.
Yeah, that's right.
Because, Indians are still going to better hire Indians, and Chinese people are still going to better hire
Chinese white person. That's it.
There's a new Chinese-owned mall called Panda Mart. There's one near Northland, and I just went in there to have a look at it. It used to be Bunnings, and everybody there was Chinese who was working there. So they have it's a Chinese-owned business. You look it up, and also it was selling products that were dangerous, and within 24 hours it was reopened because you can see Z is like no reopen. Oh, sorry Z. This is. Terrible. We've become weak, and also too, you can't say it. You know what I mean? And it's like also another great video you posted at Cafe Locked Out was that left-wing guy who was celebrating, white people being replaced or white genocide or whatever. He was saying it's good, it's good, And of course there are crazy.
Well, the Aboriginal kid or I don't know where he's Aboriginal.
Thought he was Aboriginal, did he? Well,
maybe on his
he looked as white. He looked as white as you and me. But anyway,
and that was on the same day that the other guy got arrested and thrown in jail for talking about Jewish people.
So there's two tiered already.
Jail, but this guy, and he was doing it to women. There was just a group of women, and he was attacking them. Yeah.
And we have to turn our society around now, or else we simply will not have.
It's absolutely.
That's why Pauline Hanson is. That's why Pauline Hanson, because she's the strongest hope we have that we can make some kind of, she represents this.
She's the only hope,
kind of,
really. That's why people are gravitating towards her.
That's right. There's this global revolution at the moment where people like Trump, Nigel Farage, Marine Le Pen, Geert Wilders in Holland, Pauline Hanson here, Meloni in Italy, Orban in Hungary, Putin in Russia. These people are saying, no, we've had enough. We've had enough of our countries being destroyed, and we're going to change course. And to be honest, if we were to do that, our countries could be saved, and that's why we exist at such an important juncture in history.
We could
come back.
Turn around could be immediate. Look at what happened in Argentina.
Because anybody that's come here can be removed. Anybody, we can encourage people.
That guy in Argentina has completely turned around Argentina. It's gone from an economic basket case to now it's flourishing. And what he did is he got rid of all the woke shit. He just got rid of it.
But he's a libertarian, but he's a Zionist agent as well. And they've begun to burn Patagonia to the ground down there, if you look that up.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
They wanted Israeli tourists have began burning Patagonia down. Of course, that's considered a conspiracy theory. But if you look at actually Argentine news, they're just saying that's just what's happening. For some reason, they have their eyes set on Patagonia, which is like a very large wilderness area in South America. There's a push at the moment for America in general to take South America. It's obviously Venezuela. Trump took the leader of Venezuela. They have the largest oil reserves in the world. So and there's talk of Greenland, and there's talk of Alberta in Canada joining the United States. So we're living in very interesting times, and it is a time of great chaos.
It's breakneck times. You literally can't keep up. There's like John Stapleton's doing a show on Sunday with me, and he wanted to do a show in reserve. I said, we can't do a show in reserve, because if we do a show on this Saturday, by the end of next week, a lot of what we say is irrelevant because there's so much else has changed. Can I ask you, who actually released the Epstein files? I thought they'd never do it. How did it actually happen that they released them?
Well, there are different, levels of this latest one, that it does include some accusations against Trump. Now, I do want to say this. There are people who, were victims of, or who've made reports. Now, I'm sure that some of the reports that have been made against famous people are not correct. You know what I mean? Like that Epstein probably paid, say something about Trump. Now, Trump may be guilty, may be actually involved in this, but maybe he told one of the girls, go and make an accusation about Trump. You know what I mean? And this is obviously what he doesn't want to come out. You know what I mean? But this latest one, some people say that this new light has come because Trump didn't attack Iran. there was a recent revolution in Iran. There was a color revolution, and there were people and then the protesters were getting killed, and Israel was like, "Now's the time to attack," and Trump didn't do it. So they're like, "Okay, well, you're getting another. You're not doing what And obviously, war with Iran is World War III. So there you go. And Iran has said, it's very interesting. So that's apparently what's behind it. It's fascinating.
The other thing too, though, with the release, like the releasing photos, but the trouble with photos now is AI is so good that you can believe, well, how do you know AI didn't do it? I got some photos done. We were doing a show about 1970s Australia, and I got it to do some pictures of people in 1970s Australia. I couldn't believe it. They were overexposed, like a Polaroid shot. They looked incredible, and they were all fake. But,
obviously there are a lot of fake.
Months ago,
there are fakes out there, and you have to just do your best. I mean, I guess you would look at is Richard a Q supporter? No, I'm not a Q supporter. I've never really believed that. I actually think QAnon, trust the plan and all this stuff is a actually that's to sit at home and do nothing. Essentially, is the advice of QAnon.
Yeah, that's right.
And trust the plan. Trump. I do believe that there are many great things about Trump, but he is severely compromised. I'm not sure whether it's Epstein. It could be a number of other things. Maybe it's just because Jewish investors have, lent him so much money over the years that he feels indebted to them. I have no idea what it is. But for whatever reason, he does whatever Israel says. But he won't go to war with Iran. So obviously, at the moment, which means he could get shot. He could get some leak that takes him out of office. They want someone in there who will attack Iran. So I don't know. Or maybe, maybe.
Also, the other news at the moment, Richard, for something else that's not making any news, but Belfast is burning. They're burning immigrant hotels in Belfast. The people have risen up. They've had enough.
And this can happen. That's called a pogrom, mate. And pogroms are all over. One of the reasons that, I guess many people, for example, the Jewish community, which took over, the Zionist group that took over Ukraine, Zelensky and pals and all those Jewish oligarchs, they hate Russia because of the pogroms. That there were many pogroms under the Tsars over 100 years ago when the Tsar was in charge that were very deep. A pogrom is when the group of, say, Russians got together and kicked the Jews out of whatever town. You just look them up. There's hundreds of them throughout history. So this is why there's a certain level of resentment. And also this resentment of what you call Western civilization dates back to ancient Rome, because obviously there were pogroms. They weren't called pogroms then, but for example, the Romans burnt down the temple, the one that they kissed in the wall. The original one was burnt down by, I don't know what emperor it was. It was like Vespasian or Trajan or one of these people, right?
Oh, wow.
So there is a sense of resentment, a hatred. And this is all in the Epstein files. They talk about this. They talk about the hatred. Now, I've always agreed that there is a problem with the Muslim community, Muslim immigration, sure. But it doesn't mean every Muslim person is terrible. I've never thought that. There are a lot of nice Muslim people. But there is a problem also within the Jewish community, with people like Epstein and the people who've enabled all that. Now, it doesn't mean every Jewish person. There's a lot of very nice Jewish people who love our countries and are patriotic and, legitimately supportive. So you never want to fall into the trap of, but you need to be able to talk about it. And that's what these hate speech want to stop you doing. And that's why it's so important to maintain freedom of speech in this country, or we will not have a country, or we will certainly not have a country worth living in. And that's why I thought it was so serious this week.
What a statement. And to think, we've been doing, like when we're doing the GOAT show, we've just been watching this, and I would just say I'm out here traveling. What town are we in?
Doesn't even know where he is.
We're just looking it up. We came inland from Cleve. We're in the town of Cleve. It's actually it's a really lovely little town. Agricultural town, ancient town, but it's still the same here. You go to talk to people and people are very quiet. I'm wearing some of my t-shirts around, or I've got and it's quiet. People, they don't like the bus. They're scared of the bus, And,
they will notice that.
So that's why I'm going to keep driving it around. I want to get arrested.
And that's what the purpose of Bondi is. Whether it be a false flag or an actual event that happened organically. I believe it was probably a false flag, but I'm not entirely convinced. You know what I mean?
Can I tell you the other thing that gets me though is that this is what I'm watching. It's going to piss a lot of people off. I'm watching a generation that is my age and a bit older, 60s, 70s. They're driving around in these incredibly expensive four-wheel drives. They're pulling these exceptionally, really expensive caravans that all look the same, that have everything on there. And they are just in their bliss. They have basically, they're living off the harvest of their time. Yes, they've worked. Yes, they've made money. But now they're just living off the harvest. But the next generation can't find work. The next generation can't find work. They can't find accommodation. They're watching their country be destroyed. And these people don't give a fuck. It's
they need to realize that they're beautiful,
but they've lost this thing that the Indians have, and the Indians are thinking the next generation get this, and so they keep it going. These Aussies are like, hey man, I'm good and I'm going to be dying soon, so I don't care. This individualism, and Keating used to talk about it. This I is more important than we.
Yeah, that's the atomization.
Will be the end of us. I actually look at it and think, if we're not
David talks about this,
we're watching a dodo moment.
Yeah, because
basically a lot of these whiteys haven't realized we're heading toward,
because they have their little bubble and it's protected, but it's protected until the machete wielding maniacs break into their house. It's protected,
and they won't talk about anything
until we have a Chinese government who says, you know what, private property is not yours, and we'll just take it off you whenever we want.
And they all watch the ABC.
White people need to collectivize at this point, because every other group is. Chinese people here are collectivizing. Indians are collectivizing, and then you've got groups like the NSN that are banned or whatever. I mean, what happens there? The only thing I can think of that would technically still be legal, because you have Jewish advocacy groups, you have Indian Australian advocacy groups, you have Chinese Australian advocacy groups. If you were to have an Anglo-Saxon Australian advocacy group, which is not racist, but just says, look, we just believe in this group of people and we want to advocate for their rights and for their for the traditional Australian society. I think that would probably still be legal under the new laws. So that would be my advice to people at the moment that have an interest, and that people living in their little materialist bubble realize that could all be taken away, whether it be with a pandemic, whether it be with freedom of speech, and that you may be wealthy, your family may have money, and you might exist in a nice little bubble, and there are many Australians, and because we are the lucky country, we are the greatest country on earth in many senses, but it is being taken away, and this is why it's so important.
Thing too, just to finish with that, these people I'm talking about, they are of the generation who not only grew up in the shadows of the shrines, but they knew the soldiers. They knew the grandfathers or their fathers who went over and fought for our freedom. They know.
Yeah, well, my grandfather fought in
the gravity of the sacrifice. Yeah, they know the gravity of the sacrifice that these people made, and yet they don't give a fuck.
No, it's extraordinary. The level of selfishness, the level of atomization. It's just wake up. It's either we unite now under Pauline Hanson or there is no country, okay? And that's quite simple.
I'm saying she's 70, so it's not...
Now, I've got to go, Michael. I've got to go. No worries, I wanted to have a 1 hour chat with you, and it was a very serious topic tonight, and sorry, not quite as laughy and gay, because it's not funny.
You've got 2 minutes left.
It's not funny what's happening in this country.
No, it's not.
And
this is really serious. It's very hard to make fun of this,
So I'm signing off.
No worries, Rich. Thanks for coming on. So, so I'm in Cleve. Probably going to stay here. It's only $20 a night to stay in this. They've got a showground set up. It's really fantastic how they've done it. So we'll be in Cleve for a few days. We're making our way to Port Lincoln. The book, we have to apologize because we've been selling the book from the bus, but since this happened, so we're in the National Library now. We're trying to figure out what this means, but it's selling. So we've got an order coming, and then we'll get all the orders out. And so I really want to thank everyone who's buying the book. It's done my head in, to be honest, in a lovely way. The other thing I want to say to people is I want to thank you for helping Eden, because Eden reached out to me the other night with a phone call that just left me furious at our country, because Eden was a cardiac nurse who basically, she didn't want to take it. She took it because as a country, we go, these nurses want to look after us. Well, if you want to look after us, you've got to take all these vaccines that you don't want to take just for the privilege of looking after us. And she was injured by it. She's been injured ever since. This is her words. Now she was facing homelessness, and the state did not care. They didn't care that they'd injured her, and they didn't care that she was going to become homeless and that she was going to live in a car, and she couldn't live in a car because she's so injured. But the community, you guys came to her aid. She's been offered a house in the Gold Coast. Someone has a house they're not using. One of our guys, it's up to him if he wants to mention, offered to fly her over to Perth. He's not in his house a lot. He's fly in, fly out, I think. She could stay there for a few months. We had someone in Texas, I don't know if it's you, Will, but we had someone in Texas say she can come over and stay on my property in Texas. And they've got a few Winnebagos there. She could stay there. She's got some we don't do. Someone saying to us, can you set up a GoFundMe? We don't do that anymore. There's what happened to Dave on Eggs. It's too dangerous for us. So she had one of the people that reached out to her, wanted to help. They set up a GoFundMe for her. So currently she's not homeless. Currently she has a breather where she can find somewhere to stay. But what it is this is Australia. This is who we are. This is it. We help. We've always helped because we know that life is hard, and the one thing we have to get through it all is each other. But our politicians seem to have forgotten that. I don't know what's going on with the world. I'm too small. I live in a bus. I'm way out here in the middle of the bush. I'm too small to really know what's going on. I'm just watching it unravel like you guys are watching it unravel and trying to make some sense about it. I just want to show you where I am, though. This is here. There's my Starlink. Kelly's over there cooking. That's the camp kitchen. And here it is. And I don't know how long I'm going to be on the road until I get arrested. And wouldn't surprise, I don't know if I am going to be, but it wouldn't surprise me because if you talk, you're going to get arrested. But this country is beautiful. It is worth fighting for. But at the moment, the only larrikins left, and we all love the larrikins, but the only larrikins left who are still brave enough to just be themselves are the Corellas and the cockatoos, maybe the galahs. I can hear them now. There they are. And this morning we saw something beautiful. It's got nothing to do with the decaying world, but it was sad and beautiful. We came across something dead on the road, and usually when we get to it, it's crows. But this time it was galahs, and one of them had been hit, and they were just all there, like grieving around it. So we pulled it off the road, and I don't know what it did now, but you really saw they were just baffled by it. And I don't know why I said that. I was just really moved by it. But anyway, I'm going to write something about the Indians. What I do think, if they are getting grants, I think it's legal grants. I don't think they're doing anything illegal. Lots of people have sent me, in the question I asked, are they getting grants? Does anyone know? No one was able to supply a single ounce of proof. So there was just all hearsay, rumors, and they believed it, but no one had any proof. But as Richard said, and I actually don't mind subcontinent people at all, but what I'm seeing is we are going into hard economic times, and it's been forced upon us. It's engineered. Maybe the business guys around the world who run us have decided we're not economically viable unless they get us working for nothing. And what I'm seeing is I'm seeing another culture who is better suited to these times than us. It's like an evolutionary thing. They work together, and they're just better at it. They can make businesses in these tiny country towns, which are struggling because basically I talk to business owners, they're struggling. They just can't they've got all these regulations, all these fees they got to pay, plus all the wages and all the extra wages and everything, and wages should be paid. But there's not enough profit coming in, so they're literally working for nothing. But the Indians come in, or the Pakistanis, or whatever you think, I think they come in and they got family working cheaper, and they work together as a cooperative, like the Italians did when they first came to this country, like the Vietnamese did. And I think the lesson to learn here is that we Australians, who are feeling like we're losing everything, have got to start coming together, not to defy them, but got to start realizing the only way we're going to survive is not individually, it's together. And that's the lesson we're learning. So rather than having disdain for these people, maybe it's time for us to learn lessons from them. I often say that when I'm in the Broken Hill to Mildura, around there's millions of goats, millions. There are goats everywhere. And you don't see many kangaroos. You just see goats. The only place you see kangaroos is on the Whoa, what happened then? But we never see goats. And I was thinking jokingly, wouldn't it be great if the kangaroos could learn from the goats? Could go up to a goat and say, how do you do it? How do you cross the road? Because we're using the staring technique. Just stare at the trucks, it ain't working. And so their lot could be enriched if they learned from another species that's learned to do it better, learn to cross roads. And I think here now, I think these new cultures coming in, I think the lesson to learn is if we're just going to keep and I'm worse at it than anyone else, but if we learn to work together, like we've just done with Eden, then I think we stand a chance, and we might even create a better country than we were gifted. So that's it for me. This is a new song. It's I like it, but it's nothing sensational. But it's just a nice thing. This thing is about the wind. I was on this really windy day, and everyone was so despairing, and people were feeling like they weren't free. And I felt the wind was asking, "Why aren't you free? Why aren't you flying? Look at all this wind I've got." And so I realized, and then I saw this guy on a kite ski. You know, one of the kite surfboards, and he was surfing over the waves. And I thought that's his moment of freedom, when he leaves the water and he's in the air. And so Australians now feel they're losing their freedom. So what they're doing is they're stealing it when they can. Going camping, going here, just getting away from the cameras, getting away from the regulations, getting away from those who are just going to disapprove of everything that comes out of their mouth. They're stealing freedom. And so that's what this song is about. It's called Stealing Freedom. Thanks, Richard, for coming on. Sorry for ranting. And I'll see you tomorrow with Lee. And let's see what Lee's up to. Good night.
The wind is blowing like a call. Here I am. Why won't you fly? Here I am, like a lover in your hair. So why won't you look up and fly? I watched him setting up his sail, then there he was racing over the waves. The wing was trying to lift him free of the water's grip. And for a moment, well, for a moment, maybe he steals his freedom where he can, gets drunk only with his closest friends, pissing farts around like he's taking a holiday, being a man, She walks through deeper forests where the dark is full of butterflies. And as our world burns itself down,